So let me ask you a question. Are things getting better or worse in this world as time goes on? Now that may seem like a strange question for me to ask, given how things have been going. But I think this question strikes at the very heart of the conversation that we're having this morning. When we talk about what we believe as Christians is the ending. And so generally speaking, from one generation to the next, are things getting better or are they getting worse? Well, I suppose that depends on your point of view. Because let's not mince words. It's been tough lately, hasn't it, out there? Our economy and our inflation has taken its toll on people these past several years. We now live in a world where something like COVID-19 is a very real possibility. My children live in that world. I didn't grow up in that world. There are wars and conflicts going on around the globe right now that were not going on 10 years ago. Wars that threaten our national and global security. It seems like we are more divided than ever in this age of social media and virtual platforms. If you'll remember, we began this century filled with the fears and threats of terrorism after 9/11. Mass shootings are on the rise in this country at an alarming rate over the last 20 years. Politicians and even some religious leaders seem more interested in arguing with one another than actually getting anything done. And on top of that, it's an election year this year. And most of us have been around long enough to know what sort of things happen during an election year. It seems as though we are reminded of how divided we are more so than ever during years like the one we are entering into. And so it probably wouldn't be too hard for me to convince you that, yeah, maybe things are just getting worse as time goes on. And yet, depending on your point of view, you might be able to see all the ways in which things are actually getting drastically better. Dr. Max Roser, a global economist at the University of Oxford, said one of the reasons we don't see progress is that we are just not aware of how bad things were. In the early 1800s, 45% of all children died before their 5th birthday. That number is down to below 5% today. In the 1950s, the global life expectancy was 45 years. Global life expectancy in 1950 was 45 years. Now that average is up to 71 in just 70 years of health and medical advancements. In 1800, 90% of people lived, quote, in extreme poverty. Now that number is below 10% worldwide. Looking at the global data, we are very much able to drive positive change, he says. Progress is possible, and though we still have a lot of work to do, there is no better time in human history to be a child under the age of 5 than today. He goes on to say that the best news we never hear about is that the world has actually become a much better place. Now, I'm not here to convince you that all that stuff that I talked about beforehand isn't happening, or is insignificant, or doesn't matter. But depending on your point of view, you may see the work of God all around you. I once heard a pastor say that we tend to find the things that we are looking for And I think that's very true. If all we do is focus on the negative of this world, all we do is focus on the brokenness and the injustice and the pain, the illness and the death, then we might miss all the ways in which God's kingdom is coming.